What is up, guys, and welcome back to the channel. On today's episode, we're going to do the third installment of the H22 preparation for project CB9. As you can see here, we've got no timing cover on the H22 motor, so I'm going to go ahead and show you what's all involved with replacing the timing components on H22 engine. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay, we've already removed the valve cover assembly, which is basically the first step in a timing belt service. In the next step, we need to remove this belt, which is for the power steering pump. And how you do so is there is a 12mm bolt right there we need to loosen. And there's a tensioner right here, which is a 10mm. We need to loosen that. So let's go ahead, loosen this up and remove the belt. Okay, there was one bolt I forgot to show you, which is right here. It's another 12mm, so make sure you have that loose. Make sure you have this 10mm loose, and obviously this 12mm loose as well. So as you can see here, power steering pump's got some play. I was able to get the belt off. Next step, we need to go ahead and get this alternator pulled off, because we're not going to be using this on our setup. We're going to put the F22 alternator in place. So go ahead and take this alternator off and just put it in your parts for sale pile. 14mm. Need to loosen up, and the tensioner itself right here is a 10mm. So once this belt is fully removed, I'll go ahead and take this alternator completely off. Okay, the next step, we need to go ahead and remove this AC compressor, because we'll be using the F22 compressor for this build. So there's a 12mm right there, here, here, and here. And once we have those 4 bolts off, this compressor should come straight off. So let's go ahead and remove this compressor and put it in the parts for sale pile. Okay, now that we've got the AC compressor and alternator removed, we're going to go ahead and remove this heat shield that protected all the heat from the exhaust manifold, from the alternator and the AC compressor. So you got 10mm right here and another 10mm right there. And then once we have that off, we can go ahead and remove the alternator bracket held on by 4 14mm. One right there, one right here, one right here, another one right there. Last but not least, we can go ahead and remove the AC compressor. 4 14s, one right here, 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 and right there. Now what we're going to be doing is we're going to be transferring over from the F22, the AC compressor bracket and the alternator bracket, because we'll obviously be using those 2 items on this H22, but we'll reinstall those later. But in the meantime, let's just get these 2 brackets off and the heat shield. Okay, next step, we need to remove this dipstick right here. In order to do so, there's usually a 10mm bolt that sits right here, securing it in place. But someone's already been in here in the past, changed out the timing belt and didn't put that bolt back in. And then once that bolt is out of position, you can just basically take the dipstick and just lift the assembly out. And then we'll go ahead and remove the top timing cover with this 10mm bolt right here and this 10 right here. And then we'll remove the harness for the crank position sensor, which is this harness right here. Go ahead and squeeze up on this harness, and this harness should pull right out of the bracket. And then over here on this back side, there's a little clip. So take some needle nose pliers, squeeze the clip and push it out, and that'll take the harness connector away from the bottom cover. Okay, next step of the process, in order to get this lower cover off, we've got 4 10mm bolts, one right here, one right there, one right here, and one right there, but that's missing. And once those 4 10mm are off, we got one major component to go before we get full access to the timing components, and that's this main pulley right here. Now, in order to get this off, you're gonna need a special tool that looks like this right here. Got a hexagonal piece that goes inside the pulley itself. And then you got opening for a 1/2-inch ratchet or breaker bar. Breaker bar is what's required. So what you're gonna do is you're gonna put this inside the opening right here. You're gonna take your breaker bar, 1/2-inch, put it into the opening right here. And that's a 19mm inside that opening. So if you don't have electric impact such as this is gonna make life a lot easier. You can use another breaker bar on this, but this is torqued down to 180 foot-pounds. So this is majorly torqued down. So you're gonna stick your tool in there, whether it's your breaker bar or electric impact, and you're gonna hold this breaker bar right here because that pulley wants to turn. And so once you loosen this up, this pulley should come right off, hopefully. So that's basically what there is to it for removing this main lower pulley right here. So let's go ahead and remove the main pulley. All right, guys, success. There's our 19mm bolt right there. It's torqued down to 180 foot-pounds. That electric impact buzzed off within 2 seconds. So if you don't have electric impact wrench and you do a lot of automotive work, whether it's suspension or motor, I highly recommend that tool. Make your life a whole lot easier. And the next step, we're gonna go ahead and slide this rear main pulley off. So once this lower pulley is removed, we can go ahead and take this lower cover and it should come right out. And we need to go ahead and remove this 15mm for the auto tensioner. And there's a rubber grommet. Okay guys, success. We got full access to all the timing components now. This first belt right here is the balance shaft belt. And then one right behind there, go along the cams, that's your main timing belt. So I'd recommend taking some video or some close-up pictures just to make sure you know how everything goes onto this motor if you've never done this before or don't have a manual. And then we'll go ahead and start the disassembly process and start replacing belts, seals, and water pump. Okay, now that the top and bottom covers are removed along with the main pulley, we can go ahead and get started. Now, I've never done a timing belt before, but on that beast right there, my friend James helped me replace the timing chain and tensioner on that when it hit 200,000 miles. So I have an idea of what's going on with this, even though this is a belt and the RSX is a timing chain. So I understand the concepts of top, dead center and whatnot. So anyhow, what we're gonna do is we're gonna start by removing the balance shaft belt right here in tensioner. So let's go ahead and start with this, and we'll go ahead and get the belt off. And then we'll work our way towards the back, which is the main timing belt. And we'll worry about all the camshafts and whatnot, and the lower sprocket, water pump, things of that nature. And then we'll go ahead and give you a tour of all the parts that will be replaced during this process. Okay, let's go over the parts list for the timing components on this job. So first things first, I have a Gates water pump, and then we've got a Gates balance shaft belt, Gates timing belt, Gates timing belt tensioner with roller bearing, Gates balance shaft roller bearing, and then we've got new seals. So we've got 2 cam seals for the top, the front main seal, and then we've got our balance shaft seal. And here's the parts for your reference: balance shaft seal, front main seal, cam seals. Obviously you need 2 of these. Timing belt roller bearing, balance shaft roller bearing, timing belt, balance shaft belt, and water pump. Okay, now that we got the balance shaft belt off, along with the tensioner and retaining clips, now we can go ahead and put emphasis on the timing belt itself. And what I did is I went ahead and grabbed the main pulley for the bottom, and I went ahead and grabbed my Honda pulley tool, attached it to my 1/2-inch breaker bar. And what I did is I just basically slid it in position and turned the motor counterclockwise. You always want to turn the H22 engine counterclockwise when you're making modifications to the timing belt. You don't want to turn clockwise because this motor turns counterclockwise, so just remember that. Around this main crankshaft sprocket, you've got this big sensor, which is your crankshaft sensor. It's held on with 4 10mm bolts. We do not need this sensor because we're going to be hooking this up to an OBD1 system in CB9. This is basically for an OBD2 car. Now our distributor is going to have the connection for the crankshaft position sensor inside that, so there's no need to actually have this inside the motor. Well, we've already got it taken apart with the timing case. So let's go ahead and take these 4 10mm out, and we'll take the sensor out because it's no longer needed. Okay, we got the timing belt and all the associated components fully stripped down. This is a good stopping point for the day. We got the cam sprockets removed. We're gonna go ahead and replace the cam seals. Water pump has been removed. All the tensioners have been removed, including the auto tensioner, which will be replaced with a manual tensioner. Remove the balance shaft sprocket. Yeah, I noticed that there was a lot of oil buildup here. I don't know if you can see here on camera, But on this balance shaft seal is looking like it's crooked and askew. You can kind of see how much shaft you have exposed here on the top versus the bottom. Essentially, the seal is like doing like this number. And I believe that's probably what's causing this oil cake up right here in this area. So definitely gonna replace that seal. Front main crank sprocket was removed. We'll replace this seal as well. Also had to remove this crankshaft sensor, which is bolted on both sides in order to get this sprocket off right here. And there was one more top cover that was removed right here so I can get these cam seals replaced right here. Now it's starting to sprinkle right now, and I don't have a top of an engine, so I need to put this in the garage and cover it up. So Rome wasn't built in a day. We'll continue on tomorrow. All right, success. We got both cam seals into position. We got the balance shaft seal in position, and also the front main seal in position. Now, I picked up this new tool here at Harbor Freight. This is a seal remover, but I wasn't having any much luck with this. Probably because these tips are dull. I might actually take this on the grinder and grind a sharp tip because it wasn't quite digging into the seals. So on a few seals, I had my small flathead screwdrivers and I was able to wedge them off carefully. Best tool I had here was this paint can lid remover. It's got a nice little hook on there. So if you took your flathead screwdriver and kind of made an opening for it, and then inserted this paint can remover, and it's already got like a lever action to it, so you kind of just, you know, pop this thing and push down on it, and it pops it out. And making sure all the seals are seated in position perfectly, I had this iPod tool in my toolbox, which basically kind of opens up iPods so you can change out batteries, but it has a nice flat plastic surface to it, and I basically just held it against the seal, tapped it in place with a rubber mallet, going all around the seal. But I think it worked out pretty well. So if you want to know what this tool is, basically if you were buy like a battery for an old iPod or maybe even an iPhone, they would give this to you free, but you know, always keep some tools in your toolbox because you never know when you need it. And for the next step, we'll go ahead and put the cam sprockets back in position along with the balance shaft sprocket. Okay, in regards to this groove right here, this is very important. This is a keyway, and this basically is the key. This basically retains the lower timing belt sprocket along with the main pulley itself. So you want to make sure that this angle is just like this and you slide it in position. You don't want to have it upright because as you can see right here, it kind of slopes upwards back to the diameter of that shaft right there. So when you put this on, you slide your key right in position just like so, and then put your lower timing belt sprocket on, and then basically the main pulley will go back in place. This is the old water pump. You want to go ahead and transfer hardware over. This is a pin that basically holds a spring for the balance shaft belt, and this was on there as well. So just basically take this off, take that off, and put on the new water pump along with all these 10mm bolts. Moving on to the water pump. I already went ahead and set the rubber seal into the channel of the backside of the water pump. Your water pump should come with a new seal. In addition to that, I've got some leftover Honda Bond, and I'm going to go ahead and lightly, keyword lightly, put some Honda Bond over the seal right here. It was recommended, and also the water pump that I removed from the engine also had some liquid gasket. Okay, let's go ahead and get some liquid gasket on here, and then we'll go ahead and mount it to the engine. All right, the next step, we're gonna go ahead and put the timing belt tensioner pulley into position, which goes right here. As you can see here with the sprockets that are reinstalled for the camshaft, the arrows are both pointing in the upright direction. That means the camshafts are in top dead center. Come down here to the crankshaft. This is also in top dead center. There's a small arrow marking right here that has to align with this arrow marking right where my screwdriver's at. So when working with the timing belt reassembly, these three sprockets have to be in top dead center and aligned perfectly. So let's go ahead and start doing some installation here. And here's the new timing belt pulley tensioner. Now from the old one, I'm gonna go ahead and take the mounting bolt out. And very importantly, there's a metal sleeve that needs to be mounted as well. So grab this metal sleeve right here. Okay, timing belt is officially on. It was a little tough to get on. I figured the best way to get this thing on position is to start from the bottom and then work your way up to the top cams, work around the water pump, and last but not least around the tensioner. And then what we're gonna do here, we're gonna go ahead and adjust the tension on this manual timing belt tensioner right here. And then once this belt has the right tension to it, we'll go ahead and take this nut and tighten it back onto the base. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay, there's our manual tensioner set into place. So you want to back out the main stud here, which has the rounded end to it, which meets up to the timing belt tensioner pulley right here. And then once you have the desired tension, so after you've loosened this stud right here, you want to go ahead and tighten this nut down right here, which will then secure it to the base. But doing so, once you start spinning this down to the base, this stud wants to go with it. So you need two 14mm wrenches. One to hold the stud, and then one to back this bolt down to the base itself. And basically secure your manual tensioner right there. Okay, finally got this timing belt all dialed in, top dead center. Big thanks to my friend Gavin up in Canada for his expertise. I was basing everything on these arrows point up. But however, you can see here on the cam gears, there's an indention right there, another indention right there. And those indentions have to run parallel to that deck right there, or the heads, whatever you want to call it. So once these lines are facing one another straight on level, that's where you want to be at with your cam gears. And then over here with your crankshaft, you want this arrow pointing to that arrow. So I went ahead and did 3 rotations counterclockwise, tightened up the tensioner, and make sure you tighten this tensioner bolt right here. Okay, so what I did, I loosened this nut right here, backed it all the way up here, put this shaft all the way down into the body. And I was able to pull this lever up with my thumb, and then where I was able to stop, by squeezing this, I basically just repositioned this shaft up to where it touched this, tighten this nut down as tight as I could, and now the tension, I believe, is correct. Now this is what proper tension looks like on a timing belt. You're able to twist it almost 90 degrees up here between the camshafts, just a little bit of flex. You don't want this thing too tight. It'll be sound like a supercharger. And also you could have belt walk before. So this belt is almost flush here with the camshaft. Camshaft is sticking out about 1 millimeter, which is great. It's basically looking like the timing belt I removed from this engine, so I feel confident in this now. I'm going to go ahead and give you guys a recap of what transpired with all the timing components before we go ahead and put the cover back on. So let's go ahead and start the top first. So I've got these cam sprockets. This is very important for measuring top dead center. Now there's 2 markings here. You've got arrows, they're supposed to be facing up. And then most importantly, these lines right here on the cams themselves, it needs to run parallel perfect to that deck. So now the camshafts are top dead center. So remember that. Make sure you line up these marks and then make sure that these arrows are pointing relatively straight up. But the most important thing is these marks right here on the camshafts. And then right here on the lower sprocket, there's this arrow right here. And you've got the keyway right there. And this arrow needs to be aligned perfectly with this arrow. So that means the crankshaft is in top dead center position. So you got the lower crankshaft and you got the 2 camshaft sprockets. Those 3 items need to be in top dead center when you have this timing belt in position. Those are the 3 most important things. So beforehand, we removed these bolts right here, pulled off the camshaft sprockets, and replaced the cam seals themselves right there. And then we put everything back together. Before we did that, we had to remove this bracket for the motor mount, along with this plastic cover right here with that 10 millimeter. Went on down the line, we got a new water pump. I'll leave it to your discretion if you want to put some RTV sealant, but it does come with a rubber gasket. I felt more confident using just a little bit of RTV sealant. And this is a balance shaft. Went ahead and replaced that seal right there, back there. Reinstalled the sprocket. And one of the most important upgrades on this engine is this manual tensioner from 1320 Performance. This is a manual belt tensioner. What comes with this H22 A4 is a hydraulic tensioner, and those are known to fail. So with the manual one, this is basically a fail-safe. I even put a drop of some thread lock right there, just to prevent any, movement of any threads, but I've got that torqued down pretty tight. So thread lock just gives me a peace of mind. And then behind all this, I replaced the lower crankshaft seal as well. Now I'm going to go ahead and talk about the balance shaft belt. I'm opting not to put the balance shaft belt into position. Basically, it's just for elimination of some potential vibrations of the engine. After much research, most everyone who's worked on these engines recommended to keep that belt off. I was even watching a video a few days ago about replacement of a timing belt. Basically, the culprit of that ruined timing belt was a snapped balance shaft belt. You know, I don't see any benefit of putting this on. It's less moving parts. I mean, this doesn't really connect in much. You know, this is basically free spinning. And then basically you have to put the retainer back in position for the tensioner. So I went ahead and put some thread lock on this bolt right here. Now it's got a little movement right now because this basically has no threads that goes all the way, so it stops it. And there's also a spring that's supposed to go right here. I'll hook this up and show you. So it basically hooks up like that, and let's pretend there's a belt on there, and you pull down on this, and it gives a little bit of tension on that. So the spring's got some tension. Now without that belt, the spring is real loose, and you don't want that spring on there. So I mean, this thing could just fall right off and go down into the bottom of the cavity of the timing cover, and basically just jam up down here and get caught up in the lower timing belt and basically just ruin the timing belt and blow this engine up. So do not keep the spring in position if you opt not to put the balance shaft belt back. So I'll leave that up to you guys. Now I'll leave it up to your discretion if you want to leave the balance shaft on or off. You can go ahead and do your research, but I'm going to leave this thing off. Now this is going to get tightened a little bit because there's a bolt that goes on the cover and it'll snug this in. So it's not going to have much, you know, play like this. It'll basically just push against this and this will be stationary. You don't have to worry about that. And these basically shafts will just be floating in the wind. But I don't think that's required based on the research that I've done. The most important thing is the timing belt itself, so that it is tightened down correctly and top dead center. Now one more step before we go ahead and put the covers back on. I'm gonna go ahead and grab the main pulley, slide it in position, and I'm gonna grab the special socket that goes into that pulley, and I'm gonna rotate that engine counterclockwise, keyword being counterclockwise. We'll do about 3 or 4 rotations, and I just need to make sure that these lines line up with one another, along with that arrow down here pointing to this arrow underneath this metal lip. And if everything is kosher, we're good to go. So let's go ahead and test the rotations on this motor. Okay, moving on to the next step, we can go ahead and get the valve cover prepared to go back onto the H22. So we've got a brand new perimeter valve cover gasket on the underside, and also on the underside where the spark plugs are at. So basically the perimeter gasket goes in this side, this channel right here, and those spark plug ones will go right here. Now for those of you who need a valve cover refinished, the gentleman who did this, his name is Injector Logic on Facebook. Did a phenomenal job with the stripping down and repowder coating this valve cover, along with milling down all these letters right here. Even cleaned it up on the underside as well. He did this for a phenomenal price. Turnaround time is very quick, and it'll do any color that you want in powder coat. So go ahead and give him a follow at Injector Logic on Facebook. Phenomenal job right here. Okay, let's go ahead and put these seals on the underside of this valve cover. Okay, before we go ahead and put this valve cover on, I want to go ahead and put some Honda Bond on the outside corners here, and then where the cam location starts to go upwards. Same thing right there. Here, 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 and right here. Doesn't need much, just enough to seal.
Keep them going strong until the end. Don't lead them astray. You'll be okay.
Okay, one thing I did off camera that I didn't show you is my friend Gavin up in Canada recommended to cut an access window to actually monitor the timing belt. So you can actually monitor positioning here on the camshaft, and then actually the gap that's in between the case itself and the belt. And you can see if there's any fraying going on the outside, and you can actually kind of put a flashlight in there and see the condition, you know, if it's dry rotting or not. So I think that's a good idea. The only other option for inspecting your timing belt is basically taking this valve cover, removing this whole assembly, and then taking this top cover off in order to view access. But you know, a lot of people, they'll actually cut this whole section off the top of their valve cover, and I'm not going that crazy. So you know, I think notching out this plastic window is a safe bet. So I figured cutting a slightly larger hole on the front side over here behind the power steering pump, I'll have better access for viewing what's going on. So it's up to you if you guys want to do this or not, but I think it's a good idea. All right, guys, that's all the time we've got for today's episode. I hope you guys have a thorough understanding of what's all involved with stripping down timing components, in addition to replacing new parts and dialing in top dead center on H22 motor. As always, if you guys have any questions, feel free to comment below. Now we still got a little bit more work to do on this H22, including the AC compressor, alternator, intake manifold, and wiring harness modifications. And I hope you guys can tune along for that. If you guys like this video, please give me a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe. Have a great day.